2,379 people have been reported dead or missing in the Bermuda Triangle, and that's just an estimate, meaning the numbers could be higher. Anyone who crosses the triangle is playing Russian roulette with their lives, and 8 out of 10, they get the bullet. But one man was lucky enough to experience the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle and live to tell his tale. And what he described was so bizarre that it leaves more questions than answers. The Bermuda Triangle has long been shrouded in mystery, with stories of planes and ships going missing. Anything that touches the Bermuda Triangle disappears, or worse, is found dead. And it has been that way for centuries. We have proof of wrecked ships, planes, and even victims that were claimed by this mysterious force. So this is not an episode of maybe, maybe not. It happened, and we are here to understand it from the one person who is alive to tell his tale. This is the story of Bruce Gernon.
I'm Bruce Gernon. Let me take you on a short trip through the Bermuda Triangle. My only escape from the squall was to fly through a dangerous vortex tunnel above the Great Bahamas Bank. The tunnel appeared to be about 12 miles long and was slowly shrinking in diameter.
December 4th, 1970, Bruce was at Andros Island in the Bahamas. He was actually with his father and a business partner named Chuck. They were considering building a resort at Andros, so they were surveying the place. When they were done, it was time to head back home to Miami. Bruce is an experienced pilot, even at the young age of 23, and to add to his expertise was his dad, who was a veteran pilot. In such, they had flown from West Palm Beach to this spot more than a dozen times, so they knew the way like the back of their hand. Bruce was the pilot in charge of flying a brand new Bonanza A-36 that day. The Bonanza A-36 is a safe and smooth flying plane. In fact, the plane used is still regarded as one of the best performing general aviation planes. Bruce even thinks that if they had flown on another plane that day, he would probably be dead. That's how good this plane is. By 3 p.m., everyone was ready to leave Andros Town Airport. The trip usually took an hour and a half from Andros to Miami, and there were no problems or strange events along the way. Then you also had 2 expert pilots on a brand new plane. The flight was as safe as it could get when they took off. 10 minutes into the flight, Bruce notices something weird.
As we started to gain altitude, I noticed an oval-shaped cloud directly in front of us, about 2 miles away. From its appearance, I assumed it was a lenticular cloud. While other clouds move across the sky with the air currents, lenticular clouds tend to remain stationary. The cloud appeared to be about 1.5 miles long and 1,000 feet thick, with the top of it reaching an altitude of 2,500 feet. It was white, with smooth edges, and appeared inoffensive.
This was from his book, titled Beyond the Bermuda Triangle. In this book, he goes into detail about what he saw. We can't cover them all, because then this video would be very, very long. But you can get the book online. A quick Google search will show where and how you can get the book. Now, the only problem with this description was that lenticular clouds are usually seen at high altitudes of 20,000 to 40,000 feet, but never at a low altitude of 1,500. This was strange, but Bruce was able to go through the cloud and come out fine. So Bruce just chucked it as one of those weird phenomena of the Earth. Bruce checked the radio for the weather forecast, and the response was promising. The weather would be clear between Andros and the Florida coast, with a few scattered, isolated thunderstorms. All was going well so far, until Bruce's eyes caught something weird.
We were about 10 miles offshore and climbing toward our intended altitude of 10,500 feet, when I noticed that the cloud we had passed was no longer a stationary lenticular cloud, if it ever was one. It had shifted into a huge, billowy, white, cumulus-shaped cloud. We were climbing at 1,000 feet per minute, and the cloud seemed to be building up underneath us at the same rate that we were ascending. It rose so quickly that it occurred to me that we were flying above a cumulonimbus cloud, one of the most dangerous clouds for a pilot to encounter, and that it was about to form a monstrous thunderhead. Several minutes passed as we continued our ascent. We had reached nearly a mile high, but somehow that cloud was still climbing with us, as if it was actually chasing us. To my surprise, the cloud caught us and engulfed the plane. How was this possible? We felt a slight updraft and visibility shrank to less than 100 feet. After about 30 seconds, we broke free and continued our ascent. But the cloud was still right below us, rising with us. I couldn't even get 10 yards above the cloud, and after another half minute, it closed around us again. Suddenly, another updraft gave us an unexpected burst of acceleration that pushed us above the cloud. But after several seconds, our vertical speed diminished and the cloud caught up to us again. The scenario was repeated at least 5 more times. Dad and Chuck were getting worried.
Luckily, they escaped the cloud again, and for a little moment, there was peace. After a few minutes of flying under clear skies and moving closer to Bimini, they noticed a storm forming right in front of them. It wasn't over like they thought.
As we approached the cloud, moving at about 3 miles a minute, an eerie sight unfolded. To my consternation, the cloud looked very much like the one we had left behind. It had a similar curving, semicircular shape, except the arms extended in the opposite direction as if attempting to embrace us.
The cloud was huge, reaching at least 40,000 feet. Bruce and his dad were racking their brain, trying to figure out how to escape from this situation, but every solution they brought up was blocked by a more bigger problem. For instance, they couldn't go under the cloud or above it because the cloud looked like it emanated directly from the ocean. They couldn't go around the cloud. It would take them off their flight path greatly, and it may be a problem in terms of not having enough fuel to reach their destination. The only viable option against all sound judgment and teachings both pilots had was to go into the eye of the tiger. It didn't reach a full second. As soon as the plane went into the cloud instead of around it, Bruce instantly regretted his decision.
Once inside, I realized I might have made a mistake. Although the cloud was white and fluffy on the outside, the interior was dark, as if night suddenly had fallen. But it didn't stay dark for long. Bright white flashes lit up the interior of the cloud. They seemed to go on and off in a never-ending random pattern, and the deeper we penetrated, the more intense the flashes became. Even though there were no bolts of lightning, I had no doubt that we had entered an electrical storm. We were in trouble, and I was getting more concerned by the second.
They were now trapped in a storm cloud, which according to Bruce's description, looked like a large donut hole. A billowing prison with no way out. At this time, Bruce had flown about 10 miles in this dangerous cloud, trying his best to stay alive and find a way out. Then he notices an opening in the cloud. The clouds were weirdly creating a bridge and forming a tunnel, representing an anvil shape. Anvil shapes are usually seen in cumulonimbus thunderstorms as they get stronger, and it is advised to stay clear when you see these types of shapes. But this was the only opening that was presenting itself to Bruce, and their situation was getting drastic. Left with no choice, Bruce turned the plane 90 degrees to the right, trying to get out of this cloud through the only opening he could see. As they flew toward the aperture, they saw 2 anvil heads connect, forming a tunnel that was about a mile wide and appeared to be between 10 and 15 miles long. Its center was at an altitude of 10,000 feet. On the far side of this makeshift cloudy passage, they finally saw a glimmer of hope, a bright blue sky. This gave them hope to keep pressing on as Bruce entered the tunnel.
I suddenly felt weightless and knew my seatbelt was the only thing keeping me from rising out of my seat. It was the only time I've ever experienced the sensation in my 50 years of flying. It felt like zero gravity, but it also felt like I was hydroplaning. At the same time, I noticed vapor at the ends of the wings that created parallel trails behind us. It also felt as if the plane was increasing in speed. After about 10 seconds, the weightless sensation vanished. I looked back and gasped as I watched the tunnel walls form a slowly rotating slit. I was relieved that we made it through, but I felt disoriented and asked my dad to check our position. He was always good at using the instruments to give me our exact location on the chart. This time he fiddled with the instruments for longer than usual. Then he said something was wrong. That was when I realized that all the electronic and magnetic navigational instruments were malfunctioning. Even the magnetic compass was slowly rotating counterclockwise as if the plane were making a turn.
Their compass and every navigational instrument were not working accurately, but somehow they came out of the tunnel, and instead of the clear blue sky they had seen earlier, what they saw was a dull and grayish-white sky. There was haze everywhere, but not the usual type. This one was darker than usual. It started to look like they were in some kind of fog, but they could see a lot farther, which in itself was weird because in fogs, you can't really see that far, but in this one, they could. Bruce called Miami's air traffic control to let them know that he didn't know where he was and could use their help with navigation. The plane had a transponder, which was a new technology in the 70s that helped radar controllers identify the location of airplanes. So, Bruce was hoping that the air traffic control could use it to locate them, if only things were that simple. The controller simply replied that they couldn't see them. In fact, there are no planes on the radar between Miami, Bimini, and Andros. Bruce's dad, who was frustrated, snatched the microphone from Bruce's hand and yelled at the controller. "What the hell do you mean you can't find us on radar?" The controller was confused and just said sorry, but in reality, there was nothing they could do. How do they navigate a plane they can't see? Bruce's dad was getting more angry and yelling at the controller. So, Bruce ended the call, but told the controller to let him know if anything came up on his radar. Bruce calmed his dad and Chuck, and then focused on the mission of surviving. He gradually slowed the plane down to a maneuvering speed of 180 miles per hour, so that it could turn easily if needed. Just as usual, Bruce didn't know where he was. The compass, their one navigation system, was spinning out of control. They could be going in any direction, including right back to the dangerous cloud they just escaped. Luckily, he paid attention in aviation class, and was somehow able to create a sort of imaginary compass using mathematical calculations that pointed to true north. But of course, this was a calculation that could have errors due to how it was created. But half bread is better than no bread, and that was what he was going to use. At this point, they had been in the air for 32 minutes, according to their flight time. He did another calculation with his dad, and they estimated that they could be 95 miles southwest of Miami, and just under 20 miles from crossing the Bimini chain. In the best-case scenario, they would be across Bimini Island in 6 to 7 minutes if his internal compass worked. Worst-case scenario, they would be nowhere close. Suddenly, the controller from the Miami Air Traffic Control came on and yelled through the radio that he could see them. Well, to be more precise, he could see a plane heading straight west over Miami Beach. Bruce checked his watch and saw that they had been in the air for almost 34 minutes. It shouldn't be possible. The whole trip should take 90 minutes, and that's in a good weather condition. So, how did they make it in less than an hour? He didn't want to believe the controller, or maybe the plane the controller saw wasn't their own. The fog started to break up little by little, and after a few minutes, the ribbons of fog vanished totally. Everyone in the plane could see the bright blue sky. As their eyes got used to the bright light, they were shocked to see Miami Beach right below us. The controller wasn't lying, they were really in Miami. Miami or not, Bruce and everyone were just glad to be out of the fog and see familiar ground again. This is a story that puzzled everyone, and the crazy thing about this story is that when you start to dissect what Bruce and his family experienced, we find pieces of information here and there that survivors of the Bermuda Triangle went through, even all the way back to the person who discovered the New World, Christopher Columbus. At the end of the 1400s, Christopher Columbus set sail across the Atlantic Ocean in search of the Americas. In his journal, he wrote down that he saw a huge flame of fire crash into the ocean, a strange light show up in the distance a few weeks later, and some strange readings on his compass, just exactly like Bruce. The strange light Columbus saw could be the same light that shone so bright in the plane that it almost blinded everyone in it. The Bermuda Triangle is so dangerous that it is also known as the Devil's Triangle. Lots of lives have been lost in it. In such, 3 years later, in the same area, a passenger jet going from Puerto Rico to Miami disappeared. There were 29 people on board, plus 3 crew members, and to date, were never found. Lots of people have come up with different theories as to why the Bermuda Triangle is like this. One theory says that the problem is caused by technology that was left over from the ancient lost land of Atlantis. The underwater rock formation called the Bimini Road off the island of Bimini in the Bahamas is sometimes linked to the story of Atlantis, and its residual energy could be causing the problems. Some people think that there is a parallel universe in the Bermuda Triangle, which causes a time-space warp that pulls things in that direction. Others say that UFOs are to blame. So, what's true? And what's not? Was Bruce just a good liar? Or was he just overthinking things? While the allure of the unknown has led to sensationalized theories, a closer look at the facts and logical explanations can demystify this enigmatic phenomenon. But before we get into the facts, it's important to know that these experiences are real, but not for the mysterious event we think of. Most crazy thing that happens in Bermuda can be scientifically explained. One word that comes up a lot in Bermuda's cases is compass problems. It turns out there is a logical reason for why their compass goes crazy in the Bermuda Triangle, and it's due to a phenomenon known as true north. Magnetic north, which is your compass north, and physical north, true north, are two different things. Until the modern invention of GPS guidance, the compass was the only way for travelers to properly find their way around the world. It does this by always pointing in the direction of magnetic north, but a strong magnet can quickly make it inaccurate. And guess what? Bermuda is basically a big, strong magnet. Just one little rock of Bermuda's magnetite-rich limestone can throw off a compass by several degrees, and there are 500 billion tons of this stuff in the Bermuda Triangle. So just imagine what that could do to a trustworthy compass ship. Ships could easily go off track and crash into the rocks. Planes would have trouble with both their compass and altitude readings, which means a pilot could get lost and make a fatal mistake. Secondly, we have methane hydrates. Methane hydrates is a type of natural gas that has been found in large amounts on the continental shelves, which has been used to explain some of the disappearances. Some lab tests in Australia have shown that methane hydrates bubbles can actually sink a scale model ship by making the water less dense. If these bubbles just happened to catch a ship, the ship would sink, and any wrecks would end up on the ocean bottom or be quickly spread out by the Gulf Stream. Now, as for the disappearance, as was already said, the Bermuda Triangle is a very large area of land, about the same size as the Indian region. It would be crazy to look for a single ship or plane in an area that big. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. The water pressure and current also break the ships into pieces, and by the time they reach the seabed, they are spread out far apart. For instance, the Titanic wrecks are more than 600 meters away from each other. Look, I agree with you that the Bermuda Triangle is responsible for the deaths of many people and more than 50 planes and ships. The number of times these people go missing is scary, but only until we look at how many ships or planes pass through the area. It turns out that there's a lot of traffic that occurs in the Bermuda Triangle. In such, it is the preferred route of travel because it is shorter. Airlines and cruise ships go through it daily. Almost every Caribbean cruise on Earth sails right through it. Heck, people live in the Bermuda Triangle. But as with all things, there will always be the human factor, which could lead to mistakes and to fatal accidents. But that doesn't mean that particular route is cursed. Take, for example, every single day there is a plane crash. As you are watching this video right now, keep in mind that a plane crash occurred today. Sounds scary, right? But when you measure it with the millions of flights that take place every day, Statistics will show that traveling by air is actually the safest form of transportation. That's how the Bermuda Triangle is. Accidents and weird stuff happen, but when you measure it with the number of traffic it gets, it becomes less worrying. That being said, these are the facts, these are the stories and the experiences, but even I won't lie. It's not enough to quell the questions that we have. Even science doesn't have all the answers to the questions surrounding the Bermuda Triangle. It's like the more we know, the more we don't know.